So Segpay's had to evolve over the years. Things like COVID, where everything went remote.
Those were wild times, but actually it was kind of good for SegPay in a way because people were home, not much to do. So we did see some sales increases during that time.
I wonder what people were doing.
I don't know.
You're watching the Segpay News Network. This week we're talking with Kristi Greer, Vice President of Sales at Segpay.
Well, Kristi, thanks for taking time to talk with us today.
Glad to be here.
Segpay is 20 years old
Mhm.
this year. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing.
What do you think has made the company so successful?
Well, I think basically it's our people. We started with 5 people in an office, small little office in Boca, and now we've grown to about 50. So that's been amazing to watch.
And now you have offices around the world.
Yep, we have offices in the UK. That's where we originally started. I'm headquartered here in Florida, and now we also have a Maryland office.
So let's step back and talk about how you got to Segpay. What did
Mhm.
you do before here?
Before here, I worked at a company called iBill, which was also a payment processor, and that did go out of business. And I was unemployed, and I was down in Florida for vacation, and I got a call from Cathy. It was just amazing because I was living in Maryland at the time, was down in Florida on vacation, get a call from Cathy, and she's like, "We're starting a new billing company, and we would like you to come work for us." So I was like, "Hey, I'm in Florida. I'll meet you for coffee tomorrow."
And the rest is history,
And
right?
then I signed a contract that day, put my house on the market, moved back down to Florida from Maryland, and here we go, 20 years later.
So for those of you who don't know, Cathy is Cathy Beardsley. She
Yep,
is the CEO and founder of
yep,
Segpay. 20 years in business. How have things changed over the years?
wow, a lot. From banking regulations to Visa and Mastercard regulations, it's constantly changing.
For those of you just learning about Segpay, Segpay is in the high risk payment processing space. For those that don't understand, what does that mean, high risk?
High risk means it's basically a particular MCC code that we have to code our transactions to. And it usually means merchants that are outside of traditional processing. So it would be like in the adult industry, in the dating space, a lot.
Nutraceuticals.
Some of that, we do a little bit of that, but
But I've even heard that furniture stores can be high risk, and
yeah,
airlines and hotels.
yes, airlines, anything for events that happen in the future carry a little bit more risk. If the flight is canceled, then it could issue a whole bunch of refunds. If somebody's not satisfied, it could cause a chargeback situation. So that's usually what they mean about high risk. Anywhere there's going to be opportunity for fraud or a consumer not being satisfied in charging back.
And so with high risk comes banks not wanting to deal with those type companies, right? So is it harder for a high risk merchant to do banking in general?
Yeah, typically, an acquiring bank will have so much opportunity to take on high risk in their portfolio. So they need to keep it level so that they have a little bit of high risk, a little bit of low risk to offset some of that high risk.
So high risk merchants pay a higher processing fee naturally, right? Because of
Correct.
all the dangers that things could go wrong.
Correct.
But for people in that space, it's important to have a processor, right?
Absolutely. If you want to generate revenue on your website, you're going to need a payment processor. And somebody that deals with high risk and knows the ins and outs is where you want to be processing.
Let's talk about what that process is like. I'm a high risk merchant. I reach out to you, Kristi. I'd like to do business with you. What's the process?
The process there is one, I'm going to do a deep dive into what your site is offering. So I'll need to see the entire flow. I'll need to see content that's on that website. And then from there, what we'll do is do a deep dive into your corporate structure.
So that's who owns the company, where you're
Correct.
based,
Hmm.
information that you have to have, right?
Right. And we have to drill down all the way to the UBO, which is the beneficial owner of that organization. And from there, SegPay operates in Europe, UK, and the US. So you have to have a location in one of those 3 regions. And you have to prove that you're actually there. You have to be paying taxes there and everything. So you have to totally legit set up in that region.
So if I'm a merchant and I reach out to you, do you send me a checklist? How do we know what is required of us?
Right, it's part of our onboarding application. We send you a secure link where you can upload these documents that prove that you're doing business in that region, who the owners of the company are. We're going to need some banking information where you want to receive funds from us. And of course, we'll need to see identification.
And there's some very important initials as part of this process. KYC.
KYC, know your customer. That's exactly right.
So talk to us more about what know your customer means.
Collecting all that documentation that proves that you say who you are. Basically, you're saying with a utility bill that I'm doing business in that location. With your ID, of course, you're identifying yourself. And then the corporate documents prove that you are actually incorporated, you have shareholders in that region, etc.
And having worked with you this long, it's one of the most regulated industries I've ever seen.
Yep.
Compliance is crazy. Right?
Compliance is definitely ongoing all the time and ever changing. So
And you have to be patient with the process a bit, right?
absolutely, yeah. Because not only is it something that Segpay internally will review, but then we send it to the acquiring bank. That application will also then be reviewed by our acquiring banks to make sure that everything is checked off and legit.
So to manage expectations, how long can this process last?
Well, it depends on how ready you are. If you have all the documents in place, you have all the proper disclosures on your website, we could have you up and running probably in a week or two.
Okay.
If it's a complex structure and we have to do a little bit more due diligence on this merchant, that could extend the time frame.
But it's like applying for a mortgage or doing your
Exactly.
taxes. There's a checklist, right?
Absolutely. Yep. You got it.
And you have to follow that.
Yes, to the T.
Because there's a reason Segpay is in the middle here,
Mhm.
right? Because of all this compliance.
Exactly. Plus, acquiring banks don't usually just talk to anyone off the street. So they come and they use somebody like a third-party solution like Segpay so that they know that we're actually doing all the due diligence on these merchants, and then we just pass off an application to them.
Has compliance gotten tougher over the 20 years?
Yes. And I don't see it going away anytime soon, so we'll just continue.
But that's an important part is that Segpay kind of stays on top of that for you, right?
Absolutely, yes. We started with one compliance officer, and now it's the largest department at Segpay, so
Wow.
yeah.
So Visa, Mastercard, PayPal are options that you are payment options,
Yep.
right? Do they all have different regulations?
Well, yes, Visa and Mastercard kind of rule the roost here, so we definitely have to follow their regulations. The latest ones came out a couple years ago, 2022, and it really required merchants to provide written policies about how they're monitoring their content. They also have to have a complaints link and a takedown link on their website to ensure that if somebody wants content off of a website, that it's available to come down.
And so that means if you're a cam site or model site, dating site, whatever, you can't put just people's content up without their permission.
Correct. So you have to have model release forms, and you have to have ways that you're identifying those models in each scene so that, if Mark happens to to be on camera, we need his documentation and everything is confirmed and you give your permission to do
Right.
so.
And we're also starting to hear more about things like age verification. What does that mean?
Age verification means that you have to ensure that everyone that's in the scenes or on any content is over 18. So you have to have identification there. And then on the flip side, now they're also requiring that you age verify the users that come to your website. So nobody under 18 accesses that material.
And it seems like states are competing with the federal government, that it's always something different, right? So you could be in Kentucky and be different in Texas versus New York or California, right?
Right. So each state is kind of going through and creating their own age verification laws. Some of them they vary state to state. For example, we went on vacation or holiday break over Christmas. And we come back to the office in January, and Marco has to give us all VPNs because the state of Florida is an age verification state, and we weren't allowed access to a lot of our merchants' websites because they were blocking our state. So now we have to kind of go around through a VPN.
And this is constantly changing, right?
Yep.
And you have to
So
stay on top of it.
I think about 17 states so far have legislation on the books, and there's more in the queue.
We have a change in administrations at the federal level. There seems to be a crackdown on free speech and things like that these days. Do you see it as a problem for us?
Yes and no. I mean, it comes and goes. I mean, it's cyclical. So every year, every 4 years, we get a new regime in the White House, and everyone kind of panics. And then, it kind of like smooths itself out. So I don't think it's going to go anywhere. Our industry is very resilient.
Now, there's a chance if you're a merchant out there that you've seen Kristi and the team at Segpay at trade shows all over the world. How important are trade shows?
They're very important. It's the only time that we actually get to meet face to face with our merchants, because I would be chatting with somebody for years and I see their ID, when I collect their KYC documents. But then all of a sudden I see them face to face at a trade show. I'm like, oh my God, we've been chatting for so long. And this is my favorite part, is give them a big hug
Well, that's cool too. And have a cocktail maybe.
and a cocktail.
So when you first started at Segpay, was it harder to get people to pay attention to you than it is today?
Yes, back in those days, there was a lot of billing companies that came and went. So, and Cathy and I were at one of those companies together, and we learned a lot from that. And actually, I'm not sure if people are aware that SegPay is short for segregated payments, because back when we started, we took what we learned from that other billing company and used it to allow us to safeguard client funds, right? So we weren't holding the client funds. Our clients got paid directly from the acquiring bank.
That's important, right?
Yes, because should anything happen to a SegPay, our merchants would get their money no matter what.
And we've been working with Segpay a long time. And one of the first taglines we had was, you get paid before we do,
Mhm.
right?
Yes,
And
that
that's
was one of the
important.
first ones. And then we went to all the way to paid.
So it's more than just a tagline, right?
Mhm.
All the way to paid means you're with that merchant from the moment they contact you through all these potential issues, right?
Yes, we work them through that, from when they're collecting the funds on their website to going through the settlement through the banking networks and then out to the merchant's bank account.
Why do you think people gravitated toward that?
Because that's the most important thing. Because I would always say that no matter what, we have to pay our merchants. That was the number one thing.
So let's step back and talk about Cathy Beardsley for a
Mhm.
second. How would you describe Cathy's personality first?
Well, she's amazing. She's like one of my best friends, so I have to kind of take that aside from business. But as a businesswoman, she's amazing. She cares about everybody in this company. She's like our little processing mom.
And how would you describe her leadership style?
I would say she's by example, more like coachable leadership style. She is our best salesperson here at SegPay. I think that is a part of the job that she really enjoys. So me just sitting in on merchant calls with her, I've learned so much. She's been a mentor to me for
And
more than 20 years.
And how would you say her reputation has grown over the 20 years?
Well, she's stuck with it. She's always been very transparent. If we make a mistake, we own up to it. She actually is on the FSC, so she's very involved in the industry.
And I should say that's the Free Speech Coalition.
Free Speech
They
Coalition.
fight for merchants. They
Correct.
fight for the rights of people to have cam sites and model
Right.
sites, right?
Exactly. And, to keep, like you said, the White House out of our industry, basically.
So one of the things I've noticed about Cathy is she's not afraid to dive in and do the work herself.
No, she's definitely hands-on. She's, the last one here at the office almost every day. And she's just amazing to work for.
What does it mean as a woman to see that sort of leadership?
It was great. When we started, it was, 5 women. So it was always female forward. And I think that really, really makes an impact. I feel like a lot of the content or the models in our industry like the fact that it's a female forward company.
So Segpay's had to evolve over the years. Things like COVID, where everything went remote.
Yes. So we actually all worked from home for about 3 months during COVID, and the Zoom calls were flying, and those were wild times. But actually, it was it was kind of good for Segpay in a way because people were home, not much to do. So we did see some sales increases during that time.
I wonder what people were doing.
I don't know.
We were kind of joking with your IT people about how many times you guys get attacked by bots and things. It's a constant battle, right?
Yep,
But for a merchant, fraud mitigation and protection is important, right?
absolutely.
And is that a selling point for SegPay?
Yeah, we do a great job at that. And our IT and our fraud team absolutely looks out for these kind of like DOS attacks or bot attacks or card runners. And we have services in place to catch them quickly and act.
Let's talk about a couple of those employees. If you go to segpay.com and our YouTube page, you can watch a series of videos.
Oh, yeah,
And there are a couple of ladies that we call the frangulas, right?
Frangelas.
What do the frangulas do?
The Frangelas help us review our transactions to make sure that anything that kind of smells like fraud, they automatically void it out so it never even touches the banking networks. And that helps our merchants, they don't get charged any fees for that transaction, and they're not getting a refund or a chargeback later on down the line.
Well, that's important, right? Because
Mhm.
chargebacks, if you think you're selling a subscription or a service, and then there's a chargeback,
Yeah,
that's a problem, right?
yeah, that is a problem, especially when you have to maintain certain ratios in order to stay on a good list. You don't want to get on the naughty list and have too many
All right,
chargebacks.
so what's that ratio? How's that determined?
Well, currently it's 0.9%. So you have to keep your ratio of transactions under 0.9% versus chargebacks. And if you start to exceed those levels, you get into the chargeback program, which basically you have to kind of tell the bank and tell Visa and Mastercard what your plan is to rectify this chargeback situation. And they give you 3 months to rectify. If you don't, you could get fined and ultimately you could get shut down. So it's important to keep those ratios low.
And I've heard horror stories about merchants getting fined because they weren't paying attention
Correct.
to these regulations, right?
Yeah, and they'll fine you by chargeback. So if you have 100 chargebacks and you're getting charged $25 chargeback, and then you get a fine. So it's on top of the
So it's
actual
almost
fee.
like an insufficient payment fee,
Sort of, yep.
and then you get charged a fine
Again,
on top of that.
exactly.
What are some of the most extreme fines that you've heard of out there? Because I've heard there's been some big ones.
Yeah, I mean, for chargebacks, there's, a set amount of fines. For content violations, though, that can be substantial. For one image, let's say an AI image of Scarlett Johansson is found on your website. That instance could cost you $50,000 straight away.
So this is serious business. If you're in this high risk space and you want to get paid, you need a partner that's helping you.
Right. Maintain the content. We do scan the content of your website every month. If we see any type of violation, we'll reach out and say, hey, you need to modify this or remove it or edit or whatever the case may be. But we want to find it first before anyone else does.
You're almost like the police or a detective.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the compliance and fraud team. They're little detectives over there for
And we
sure.
call Chris our main guy. He's the fraud father,
Yeah,
right?
the fraud father.
What's his job?
He runs the whole department. So he actually came from a background where he was working at other pay sites. So he kind of was a merchant before he evolved into the compliance role that he's in today.
So he knows what it's like.
He knows the tricks of the trade.
So there are a lot of billing companies out there, big ones like Stripe,
Mhm.
competitors that we won't mention. But why do merchants pick SegPay?
I would say just like we talked about, we really care about controlling fraud, making sure that the content on your website is absolutely clean and won't get you in any trouble or violations. It's us. Like we have a great tech support team, so you always have somebody here to work with and reach out to. You're just not a number to us. So we treat all of our merchants
We
that way.
ran an ad once that said to speak to our CEO, press 1.
Yes, Cathy will get on a phone call. She will email sales leads that come in off the website. Yeah,
So we're here, but it's almost 24/7
right.
for real, right? How have payments changed over the years? It's not just credit cards anymore.
No, actually, a couple of years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, we added a crypto solution onto our platform. We're getting ready to launch a SEPA, which is in the European Union. And we also offer PayPal.
Yep.
And Visa and Mastercard is still kind of king.
But PayPal, that was a big deal.
Yes.
It took Segpay for almost 5 years
Yes.
to become a PayPal partner.
Yes, and again, that's the persistence of Cathy. She would go over to the UK, knock on their little door and say, "Hey, what about us?" It's a disadvantage to us when you have one of our competitors allowing this payment option and we were not. So Cathy, yeah, she really worked that.
So Segpay actually started in Europe,
Correct.
right?
Yep.
Because that was the opening that Cathy saw.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes, and we got a license over there to start doing party aggregating payment processing. And then we actually got approached by Wood Forest, which was a US acquirer back then. They asked to do business with us. So we got into the US market, and that was huge for us.
Wow, yeah,
Yeah.
that opened a big door. Now, Segpay is about to expand again.
Yep.
Where are we headed next, mate?
Down under. We're going to Australia. Yeah.
That's very cool, right?
Yeah, very cool.
All right, so Kristi, we've spent a lot of time on segpay.com, the website. Does it help merchants to go there?
Absolutely. It definitely gives all of our product offerings right there. Another thing that we do is put our merchant documentation available right there. So our APIs, everything is open for people to review. I think that's helpful for a merchant maybe deciding which processor they want to use to be able to see how easy our integration is.
What makes us different? What do you think is a determining factor that makes Segpay the choice?
Well, not only do you get full support of all of our employees here at Segpay, we have an easy integration. Our payment platform, we constantly develop on it to make sure it's robust and that you're getting the best throughput out there. Plus, we have PayPal, so that also is very helpful, and it drives sales for our merchants.
And what does PayPal mean for the average merchant?
Well, in the adult space, sometimes users want to have some sort of anonymity, and so they want to
attract them
yeah,
so
they
much.
want to make sure that their wife doesn't find out that maybe they're on a website kind of thing. So it kind of gives them that type of security.
All right, Kristi Greer, thank you
Thanks, Mark.
for being our guest.
All right. Thank you.